In a few moments from now, Scorpio starts creeping into the water from the southeastern corner of the temple tank. There's a hollow there in the third step under the water, large enough to hold an unhusked coconut. And I know that on this day of the year, at this precise moment, and I know the precise moment, for Scorpio stretched out in the eastern sky in all his magnificent glory, with the lowest point of his curving tail just about to set off from the horizon. At this particular moment, his reflection will enter the water at the exact point under which the hollow lies, as though he was swimming out of that cavity. And looking at the constellation from this top step of the tank, even with my back to the temple, I can tell you which star is perched on the brass tip of its pinnacle. For I know every nook and cranny in these grounds. I know where each star will be as the skies revolve through the year. This temple, this tank, these rough grey boulders towering over them, the flowering shrubs and trees, the birds that come and go through the season, they are my world. A private universe from which I never for a moment wanted to step out. I am the priest here.
Prabhum Prananatham Vibhum Vishwanatham Jagannathanathan Sadananda Bhajam Bhavadvandya Bhuteshwaram Bhutanatham Shivam Shankaram Shambhunishanamide Galerundamalam Tanau Sarpajalam Mahakalakalam
I have lived here all my life and discouraged all friendly attention from the world outside. And in the isolation of this place, I spend most of my time with the linga, talking to it, singing to it, even discussing recent political developments with it. But most of all, decorating it with flowers. This linga is not ornately carved like some in the neighborhood. It's essentially a plain phallic stump with a smooth crown and a rough-hewn vulva for its base. Endless ablutions of milk and ghee and oil through the centuries have managed to give it a slippery surface. So making the flowers stay on it is not an easy task. I have lost count of the number of hours spent devising new ways of covering it with flowers. This linga is your stepwife, my wife grumbles. But she is also proud of the fact that my obsession has gotten me recognition. The chieftain of this region, who lives on the fort on top of that hill, is an energetic young man. He is deeply devout and a great admirer of my floral efforts. Each day at sunset, a cannon goes off on the ramparts, indicating that the chieftain has left his fort for the temple. That gives me a full hour to get ready for the puja. My wife takes care of the basic ritual requirements like joss sticks and camphor and the arrangement of wicks in the different silver plates for the arati. I take a dip in the tank and in my wet dhoti sit down inside the sanctum surrounded by baskets of flowers. Everything else then recedes into hazy, scarcely felt distance. For the next hour, it's only me and the linga and a conversation conducted through flowers. Mallige, Sevandi, Shenbagam, Samandi and Kanakambara. She was bending, holding the pallu of a sari spread out in front of her. As I dropped the shells into a sari, I noticed the mole on her right breast. I looked up at her. There must have been something unusual about my movement, for she looked up too and caught my eye. For a moment, we stared at each other, and then she turned away. I wanted her.
நீ இல்லாமல் எனது நெஞ்சு எது
never lusted for a woman before, so felt emasculated by this sudden weakness. Yet I could not control the fire raging in my loins. Till the rest of the week, I started my day impatient for a glimpse of her. Courtesans are noticed and talked about. So I discovered, without sounding too curious, that her name was Ranganayaki. She had just moved into a nearby town. She was believed to be wealthy. I knew the house she had rented. It was one of the most spacious there. She's a courtesan, I kept telling myself. She is a courtesan, so probably not beyond my reach. But I was a poor priest with nothing to offer her. Soon, I learned to search her out in the crowds, gulping in quick glimpses of her, feeling my insides cramp every time I caught sight of her. She was of average height. She was always in the company of a much older woman who I was told lived with her. She was always smiling, her bright teeth set off by a dusky skin. Each day there was a quick meeting of her eyes. She never stayed long enough for me to register her features. So every day, as she received the prasada, I noticed them more, and as she looked up, I hurriedly made note of a fresh aspect of her face. Her brilliant eyes, which she quickly averted, a straight nose ending in a slightly upward tilt, her lips like thick petals, rimmed in a smile with dark sensuousness. And at night, I put them all together like in a jigsaw puzzle. She didn't come on the 6th morning nor on the 7th, and I was in agony. After the festivities on the last day got over and the temple priests deserted, I went to the Lord and pleaded, I'm stupid, I'm mad, I don't know why I'm doing this. So help me please, or at least forgive me. Then I cracked a coconut, tied the halves in my shoulder cloth, and made my way to Ranganayaki's house.
करचरण कृतं वा कायजं कर्मजं वा श्रवणनयनजं वा मानसं वा गीतम् अविहितं वा सर्वमेतत् क्षमा
It was dark, but it took me no effort to reach her house. I knocked, there was a pause, and then the old woman opened the door. She recognized me and said in a tone of astonishment, Sir, what an honor. You and your mistress have not been coming to the temple. Is she unwell? The old woman pulled the corner of her sari to her mouth and giggled behind it, and I knew I had made a fool of myself. Woman, I have brought you prasada. To include a mistress in this offer would have been to repeat my imbecility. The old woman took the coconut shells. Please wait here, sir, she said, as she disappeared into the interiors of the house. My idiocy, the inauspiciousness of this occasion, and the ridicule I would face if anyone saw me standing at this door came crowding in on me, and the old woman reappeared. My mistress would like to speak to you, sir, she said. Please come this way, and led me through the cavernous house. Ranganayaki was sitting in the corner of her backyard on a mat spread out on the floor. Her figure shadowed rather than lit by a tiny oil lamp. The lamp struck a glint of a silver water pot placed next to her, demarcating the area beyond which she could not be approached during her menstrual seclusion. Thank you for the prasada. Her voice indicating by its clear timbre that it had been trained for singing. I am sorry I cannot welcome you personally today. I would have never dared invite you here. But since you've been kind enough to come to my house, may I ask a favor? I did not reply. The only women I knew well were my wife and my mother, and I was too frightened of what I might get into if I attempted a reply here. She paused and then proceeded. I've heard of your great skill in flower decoration. I've seen it now myself, and I'm overwhelmed. I can never step inside the sanctum, and you can never be seen with me in public. So could you please spare an evening for me, just one evening? Come here and show me how you do it. I was silent. It surprised me that she took my silence for acquiescence, for she went on. I'll be released from this corner in a day. Would it be brazen of me to expect you the day after tomorrow? I will be here, I said, because any other reply would have been needlessly discourteous, and left. 2 feverish days later, I was back at this doorstep with a bundle of flowers taken from the linga. This time the door opened as if somebody was waiting behind it. It was the old woman. Ranganayaki was standing in the hall, half concealed by a pillar. Despite the shadows cast on her by the pillar, I could see her hair was loose and tumbled in large quantities across her face and shoulders. She was holding her sari close to her body as though she was feeling cold. Please come in, she said. At least today I can ask you to sit down. The old woman pointed to a mat on the floor. I sat down, opened the bundle of flowers and laid it out in front of her. Ranga shoved the fingers of her right hand through her lush hair to push it away from her forehead, and with a quick shake of her head, settled them down on the nape of her neck. She moved nearer the flowers. I could see she had made herself up carefully with gold in her eyes and sandal paste and turmeric on her cheeks. The flame of the oil lamp lit a sparkle on her lips which ran like quicksilver as she spoke. They are beautiful, she said. I can see the expertise begin with the choice of flowers. Could you please explain the whole process of the puja to me? I want to know every detail. First, you bathe the linga, cleaning and preparing God for the decoration. She listened intently to my narration, and when I had finished, she said, "Can you display some of your great skill to me here?" I looked around wondering how and where I could begin when she said, "I've had a bath this evening, a head bath. Do I need to bathe again?" "No," I said, unsure of what she meant, but trying to make out that at least I'm sure of what I meant. "That won't be necessary. We can begin then," she said, and casually put aside the sari she had covered herself in and stood in front of me. I have never seen a woman completely naked before. At home, we used to have a bath in the open, in the corner formed by the neem and the banyan tree in our backyard. So my wife always covered herself in a sari even when having a bath. On the days I wanted her, I'd give her a look which she had come to recognize. And at night, after everyone was fast asleep, she'd curl into my room for a furtive scuffle in bed which required a minimum of uncovering. There were her children and my old parents, and you never knew who might call out for help. The problem, however, was more basic. My wife would have died of shame rather than being seen naked, even by herself. I was trying to come to terms with the bronze vision in front of me. My heart was palpitating so wildly, it threatened to burst my eardrums, and my hands so trembled, I couldn't even pick up the garlands. I prayed to the Lord not to let me make a fool of myself. I was supposed to show her how I decorated the linga, but I can be playful with the linga, while here the natural smells of her body, which seeped through the perfume she had used, and the continual touching and smoothing of her naked skin, demanded that I keep a firm control over myself. Fortunately, Ranga herself was so calm and immobile that any aimless advances were out of the question. She watched with immense concentration as I selected the different lengths of garlands and pondered over which limb of hers each should go to. Often, her sculpted sinuousness virtually dictated the design. The strings of the malligai buds seemed to need no help from me as I ran across her bosom to pass under her armpits and cross themselves into a loose knot between her shoulder blades. They then plunged down to the small of her back, flowed along her waist to the front, to the gentle mound below her navel, and down her thighs. But I had to use all my ingenuity in designing a filigree that could stay snug against the curvature of her hips. Once or twice, the strings dug into her skin and she flinched in pain. But she smiled, asking me to proceed. Her breasts were firm and tight. I chose the white parijata with its orange stem to loop around the bosom. I merely had to push the ends, and they held. I then placed a hibiscus in the opening, not so much to secure the loops as to give a contrast in shape and color to the parijata. But it did not work. So I took it away and replaced it with a curling flame of the forest. Why did you change it? Her only question. It obscured the mole on your bosom, I said. She laughed. The beauty of design lies in the detail, I added, flattered by the adulation in her laughter, and immediately felt foolish. She noticed that too, but a trifle carefully, and did not let on. And while a whole new world of patterns was opening within me, thoughts of the linga kept crossing my mind. I pitied it, felt exasperated by its unimaginative contents. Why did its shape have to be so bland and unintended? That one had to balance garlands on it precariously and improvise superfluous knots to hide some ungainly strings. Why didn't the Lord have a form that inflamed invention like Ranga's did? Nothing more was said as I continued to deck her up. The old woman kept coming in and out, which at first irritated me. But Ranga, with a wave of her hand, suggested that I ignore her. It's only when the woman tried to help me with the flowers that I turned on her with such fury, and she reared, and Ranga laughed out. Thereafter, the old woman kept by herself to the door, chuckling appreciatively. When I finished, Ranga asked for the large mirror. She looked at herself from different angles, her eyes narrowing as she picked out the details, widening in admiration. As she silently handed the mirror back to the old woman, I stammered, "What do you think?" Ranga picked a Shevanti flower and deftly wove it in the sacred thread on my shoulder. The old woman went out, leaving the door ajar. This then became my daily routine, but never exactly repeatable, so nerve-wracking and exhilarating in its unpredictability. "I've given up putting flowers in my hair," she laughed. "You've given me a sense of inferiority." I had to undress her. She would help me. Sometimes a knot on her breast cloth was tied in such a mischievous knot that I threatened to cut it with a knife. But Ranga said, "That's not playing the game." At other times, the cloth fell off without warning at my merest touch, leaving me staring breathlessly at a bare bosom. When I'd finished, I would lay her down and kiss the moon. With a sudden movement, Ranga came to life. I used to go home quite late, ravenous. Ranganayaki had stopped teasing me about consuming a body, but not about the food in a house. I used to take a dip in the tank before heading home. My wife was still away. She never ate before me. As soon as she heard me splashing in the tank, she started heating up the food. And while I ate, she stood rigid by the door, lanky, concerned, but still. She never asked me about Ranganayaki. I knew she never would. It had only taken a couple of days for the news to spread to the surrounding villages. And I knew the main reaction would be that of amazement that a beautiful and obviously wealthy courtesan had taken up with such an impecunious lover. Eyebrows would be raised at my good fortune or my virility. But all that mattered very little to me. I was distressed at the pain I was causing my wife. I knew I had made her a target of vicious gossip. I loved her. I could sense her anger, her humiliation, and I felt ashamed of myself. Conversations at home were reduced to fragments. We even stopped looking at each other. There was nothing I could do. My wife had picked out a new element in my daily puja. I chose a wider variety of flowers and chose them with greater care and experimented different floral motifs on the linga, which were distinct from what I would do with Ranga later. The garlands were the same inevitably, but God was not to be used as a preliminary model for what I would do with her body. Each day I coaxed the flowers, say something special to the linga and something completely different to Ranga. There was no one with whom I could share the excitement of this new development with. Or so I thought until 12 days ago. That was Tritiya, the third day from the full moon. That evening, as usual, my wife and I waited for the cannon to sound so we could start getting ready for the puja. The usual hour passed. There was no cannon. I asked my wife to leave. Better go home and feed the children, I said. After all, you can come back as soon as you hear the cannon shot. She nodded and left. I sat here, right here on the top step of the tank and waited. After a while, the prolonged inactivity and the increasing apprehension started to play on my nerves. It was unlike the chieftain to be so late. I had to do something. So I went back to the sanctum and started to tie a garland on the linga. I felt better. It brought me back the warm security of being with an old friend. I was talking to the linga, wondering what could have delayed the chieftain when my wife arrived. Without a word, she attended to the details of the puja. We finished what we had to. Still there was no movement on the fort. I came back to my watch, worried that by now Ranganayaki would be anxious, leaning against her front door, just like my wife was doing at the temple courtyard at the moment. The three of us, frozen in the act of waiting for the cannon to sound, waiting for the chieftain to move so we can move on with our lives. More hours passed. I got tired of sitting. It would have been considerate of the chieftain to send us a message. But who was to teach etiquette to royalty? I came back to my watch. My wife was stretched out in front of the main door, fast asleep. I stood there and watched her. She lay there like a wet rag, mouth half open, all excitement of life drained out of her, exhaustion oozing from every limb. I don't remember when was the last time I saw her sleep. She looked so much in need of that rest that I didn't have the heart to wake her up. So I came back to my vigil. Another hour, it was close to midnight. It was unthinkable that the chieftain would come at this late hour. So I went back to the sanctum and gently stepped over the recumbent figure of my wife, which woke her up. She sat up, holding a pallu close to her chest, and looked around, wondering which place she found herself in. We better finish the puja, I said. He won't come. There must be some crisis at home which is keeping him. But we can't keep the Lord waiting forever. She nodded wearily. I performed the puja. I was boiling within myself, telling God, I hope He didn't mind my rather perfunctory rites that evening. After all, the linga was Shiva and he was used to austerities. The formality over, I put a flower in the outstretched hand of my wife. As she straightened to tuck it in the knot of her hair, she looked into my eyes directly and held that look. My wife and I were there, just the two of us, alone, like we could never be at home, at a time and in a place where nobody could possibly surprise us. And for the first time in her life, she let her infinite self-control slip as she bared her desire as brazenly as though she had let her pallu drop from her bosom to expose her blouse and let it hang there unretrieved. At any other time, even a quarter to the thought of sex while in the temple would have horrified her. But at this moment, she was inviting the shame of it. I could feel my insides reaching out to her and was taken aback that I had forgotten I could even want her. The linga sat there looking at us and I snarled silently at it. Isn't it funny? I'm going to defile your sanctum and it's going to be with my lawful wife, for Ranga would never be allowed inside here. It would have been the easiest of things for me to turn to my wife and take her by hand. But there was a constriction inside me which paralyzed my movement. Confused, I turned to the linga and picked up a garland. Why did I do that? Was it because I had lost the habit of making love without bringing flowers into it? That gesture proved fatal. The desire faded. The glow went out of her eyes. Bleakness seeped into her voice as she mumbled, "Don't go in the dark. Snakes and poisonous insects. Why don't you stay at home?" The whining tone in her voice insinuated that she already knew my answer, and that infuriated me. You better go home. I'll be back late, and don't wait for me. I'm not hungry. I turned away from her and started picking the flowers from the garland. I took my bundle and left. There was no sign of any movement in Ranganayaki's house, but a faint light seeped from under her front door. I knocked. I had to knock twice before there was rustle of clothes and the old woman asking who it was. "It's me," I said. The door creaked open. The old woman was there, and beside her was Ranganayaki, her hair rumpled, her clothes disheveled, smiling an apology. "I'm sorry I woke you up," I said, irritated. "I'll go back," and turned to leave. To my eternal regret, I did. For even at that moment I could have salvaged my fate. But Ranganayaki grabbed my arm. "I'm sorry I fell asleep," she said. "But as you can see, I haven't retired yet for the night," she laughed. "I'm still in my best sari." And added, almost plaintively, "I was waiting for you. You're so late. Don't blame me for going to sleep." Suddenly I thought of my wife's bleary eyes and melted. I stepped inside the house. My Lord and Master failed to turn up, I growled. I'm glad mine didn't do the same thing, she retorted, and laughed one of those laughs against which I had no defense. We did not make love that night. I just wanted to go to sleep next to you. But Ranga insisted on the flowers. You came all this way at this time of the night through poisonous snakes and vermin. I must know what flowers you brought me and what you intend to do with them and with me, she insisted. As long as you don't mind me going to sleep. And she struggled to stay awake as I started to wake her up. Soon, I was leaning against the wall and she was reclining on my shoulder, dozing off, opening her eyes to smile an apology and floating away again. As I kissed the marigold I had woven in her tresses, I saw the moon peering precariously into the darkness. I wanted to kiss it, but didn't do so for the fear of disturbing her. Soon, she fell into drugged sleep, still moaning in defiance, resisting sleep like a child. I bent down and kissed the moon. The tranquility of the night was shattered by the cannon shot. It was barely more than a distant thud and hardly caused a ripple in her sleep. But I had spent years training my ears to catch its faintest reverberations and responded to its pre-entry sermons instantly. I sprang to action. Frantic, I started pulling the flowers from her hair. She sat up, groggy and dazed, yelping in pain as I snatched at the flowers. He's coming, I said without wasting my time looking at her. I must go. Time was precious. I rapidly calculated in my mind that I would need half an hour to get things ready for the puja, and I was hoping that my wife had not slept through the cannon shot. My wife was already waiting at the temple door when I arrived. Get the things ready, I shouted as I rushed past her. She didn't know what things I meant. Get on with it, woman, quick. He'll be here at any moment. But flowers? As I sat down and opened the bundle and started decorating the linga with the flowers, there was a sharp intake of breath. I felt perfected by the revulsion I could sense welling up inside her. We had already used these flowers for the puja. They were now droppings, polluted discards. What further use they had been put to in Ranganayaki's house? She didn't need to try hard to imagine. To use the same flowers again on the linga was desecration. She didn't say anything. She just stood there and stared at me, and it annoyed me that she felt I needed a rebuke. Get on with it, woman, quick, he'll be here at any moment. By the time the chieftain arrived, the inner sanctum was as fresh and welcoming as could be at this late hour. The flowers were a trifle faded, but that was to be expected at sunset. The chieftain was accompanied only by the closest of his courtiers, who all looked exhausted but not him. He smiled, apologized for being late, and said that envoys from a neighboring kingdom were visiting and had to be looked after. He complimented me and my wife for how beautiful the linga looked. Relieved, I performed the puja. Once I finished, I held out a plate of flowers for him to pick his choice of flower as prasada. Then, as I turned to one of his courtiers, I heard the chieftain say, I didn't know God had long hair. The tired drone of the courtiers sloped off into silence. A chill invaded the sanctum. There was the chieftain's right hand, stretched out in a dramatic fashion, his thumb and forefinger in a pinch, his other finger stiff and pointing as in a dance gesture. And nearly a foot below his fingers, a marigold dangled in the air. He looked at me. I didn't dare look away from him. And yet at that moment, I wasn't concerned by his cold anger, as much as anguished that I was subjecting my wife's scraggy knot of hair to public derision. I knew that everyone there knew, and she knew That strand by which that illicit flower was swinging in the air was not hers, could not be hers. I didn't know God had long hair, he repeated. I gave the only reply possible under the circumstances. If we believe God has long hair, I said, he will have long hair. There was a pause, and the chieftain said, prove it. I will, your majesty. If you'll allow me grace to the next new moon. Done, he replied. I'll be back at the coldest hour on that day. And he placed the flower back on the plate. I noticed he hadn't thrown the flower away contemptuously to exhibit his annoyance at my insolent response. He had placed it back almost respectfully, as though the judge in him was willing to give me half a chance. That was 12 days ago. What happened thereafter is quickly told. As soon as the chieftain left, I dispatched my wife home, asking her not to disturb me till I sent for her. I forbade anyone, including her, from entering the temple precincts. I shut the door of the main sanctum, sat down in front of the linga, and prayed. Trayambakam yajamahe sugandhim pushtivardhanam urvarukamiva bandhanan mrityormukshiyamamritat
Trayambakam yajamahe
sugandhim pushtivardhanam urvarukamiva bandhanan mrityormukshiyamamritat
Trayambakam yajamahe sugandhim pushtivardhanam urvarukamiva bandhanan mrityormukshiyamamritat.
I did not know whether prayer is the right word. I had known the linga since my birth. My association with it was the longest and closest in my life. As a child, I had preyed on it, and in remorse wept on it. Even as an adult, I poured out my woes to it, and bragged about how my success with the flowers has made this place the chieftain's favorite shrine. Today I pleaded with it to save my face. Just that. I had disgraced myself and was trembling at the thought of facing the world in this state. I didn't know what God could do. I had created a situation which was even beyond his thinking. But I had no other option than to surrender to him. For the next 12 days, I cleansed myself of all existence, every name and person, except the linga. This morning the onlookers started gathering even before it had dawned. By the time the chieftain arrived, there was such a crowd that even he couldn't come in. The soldiers had to use the sticks to make way for him. I was in a stupor, from hunger, from lack of sleep, from a complete sense of desolation. I dully wondered why they had all come. What had they hoped to see? A public humiliation? What did the chieftain expect to see? Why had he joined in this charade? Indeed, what had I hoped to achieve by asking for this grace period? I led him through the vestibule. I closed my eyes in one final prayer and opened the door of the inner sanctum. There was a pause, and then the chieftain gasped. The lamps were not lit, and the sanctum was in darkness, but not such darkness that one could not see the long and thick hair come cascading from the linga, completely hiding it. I stared. He stared. He looked at me for some explanation. I had none. I was as stunned as he was. He ordered the torches to be brought and the lamps to be lit, but that was not needed. Now that the sanctum door was fully open, waves and waves of thick black air came billowing from it, its tips gently eddying and swirling in the evening breeze. Everything seemed to move in slow motion, blanketed by thick, hot mist. I heard someone say, they could be glued. And the chieftain responded falteringly, should we test it? One of his Brahmin courtiers stepped inside the sanctum, twisted a tuft of hair around his fingers and tugged. He put in all his might and the tuft came out into his hand. He took it to the chieftain, who examined it closely and touched its roots. There was blood on his fingers. The courtier ran back to the sanctum, felt for the spot from where he pulled the tuft of hair and collapsed, crying hysterically, "It's bleeding! It's bleeding! I have wounded God." I did not faint. I don't remember what followed thereafter. The chieftain falling at my feet, begging forgiveness, the crowds rushing forward, seeking my blessings, until suddenly my wife suddenly stepped in and took me home. No one, not even the chieftain, could question her authority. I fell into deep sleep and woke up refreshed. It was close to midnight, the usual hour for the evening meal. My wife served me food, supervising proceedings as usual, leaning against the front door. The only thing she said was, "She is gone." She and the old woman left the very next morning. But I knew Ranganayaki's disappearance would make no difference to my wife. The courtesan was gone and was replaced by Lord Shiva. I am now among the chosen of the Lord. She could no longer think of herself as my wife, only my slave and guardian. All shades of marital bonds expunged in favor of her devotion to me, her good fortune in having me for a husband. The food gave me strength, and here I am back on the temple tank. On my way, I peeped into the sanctum. The hair is gone, but the wound is still fresh where the Brahmin had pulled out that tuft of hair. On top of the hills, soldiers with torches were guarding every entrance to the temple. I am the state saint now, to be prized and protected and shown off to visiting envoys. But I have a quarrel to pick with God. Why did you do this to me? All I had asked was courage to live in disgrace, for I have tainted myself. The chieftain had every right to question me, to humiliate me in public if he so decided. For I am guilty of gross dereliction, of sacrilege, guilty of cruelty to the two women I loved. Why then did you cast your vote on my behalf? Because I loved you? Do you have the right to mock justice in favor of love for you? Or do you have a different logic? If you do, you have no right to expect me to abide by it, not demanding to know what that logic is. Such grace is condescension, even if it comes from you. I refuse to bear the burden you have foisted on my shoulders. Why should I bear it? You must understand, I simply cannot live on your terms. Scorpio is crawled out of its recess in the third step under the water. Its reflection is floating towards me now. The hollow is now empty. As a child, I used to shove my head inside the hollow to test how long I can hold my breath. I am going to do so again now, but not to test my lungs. I shall seek in the narrow confines of that hollow the answers that you have denied me. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming here on a Sunday evening. Before I waste any more time, calling on stage the director of the show, Denver Anthony Nicholas.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all being here this Sunday evening. This is a very new genre of play for me to direct. So thank you.